My wife forged my signature, made deep fakes of me embezzling millions, and tried to drug me at dinner so she could escape to Costa Rica with her personal trainer using our company's stolen money. When I finally asked her what she wanted, she whispered, "What do you want? Money? The company? A divorce?" I just smiled and said, "Just the truth, Catherine." That was 1 month ago. Yesterday, she sat in her office surrounded by shredded evidence and torn plane tickets, staring at the wall like it might tell her how to undo it all. About 1 year ago, things started feeling off with my wife, Catherine. She suddenly became obsessed with our company's finances, started attending board meetings she'd never shown interest in before, and even hired a new accountant without consulting me. She began working late at the office, reviewing books, and started treating me like a business rival rather than a husband. She changed all her passwords, installed new locks on her home office, and would snap her laptop shut whenever I walked by. Of course, I became suspicious when I noticed discrepancies in our accounts. I started digging deeper and found emails on her computer between her and our CFO discussing phase 3 of the restructuring, a project that didn't exist. But that wasn't the worst part. For some reason, she had opened several offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and had been slowly siphoning money from our joint business for months, hiding it through a complex web of shell companies. I became extremely concerned when our company credit cards started getting declined, and I discovered she'd been documenting every financial decision as if I had made it, creating a paper trail that led directly to me. She was photographing me signing routine documents, then using those images to forge my signature on fraudulent transfers. She'd even hired someone to create deep-fake security footage showing me in the office during weekend nights when I was actually at home. Within days of investigating, I found forged documents with my signature authorizing massive transfers, emails sent from spoofed accounts that looked like mine approving suspicious transactions, and falsified board meeting minutes where I'd supposedly voted for financial decisions I'd never heard of. She wasn't just stealing, she was building an airtight case that I was embezzling from our own company, complete with a trail of evidence that would send me to federal prison for decades. The scope of her betrayal was staggering. She'd been planning this for at least 3 years, slowly positioning herself as the concerned wife who was discovering her husband's financial crimes. She'd even consulted with divorce attorneys about protecting herself from my supposed criminal activities, creating a record of her being the victim. Our entire life together, the vacations, the anniversary dinners, the vow renewals, had all been a performance while she methodically planned my destruction. But the most devastating discovery came when I found her secret laptop hidden in the attic. On it were detailed plans for her new life, a beachfront property in Costa Rica purchased under a fake identity, plane tickets booked for 2 days after my planned arrest, and intimate photos with her personal trainer Joey, who she'd been seeing for 2 years. There were love letters discussing their future together, funded by the millions she'd stolen from the company we'd built from nothing. They'd even picked out baby names. She was planning to start a new family at 52 with my money while I rotted in prison. Seeing it broke my heart, and I actively distanced myself from her. I stopped sharing meals, moved to the guest bedroom, and responded to her questions with one-word answers. Acting cold actually made her very paranoid, and thus I got an evil idea. I won't confront her now. I'm gonna draw this out, break her mentally, and ruin her effing life. I decided to start small. Every morning, Catherine would check her secret accounts from her locked office, so I began subtly adjusting things around the house. I moved her coffee mug half an inch to the left. I changed the angle of her desk lamp by a few degrees. I switched 2 books on her shelf. Nothing she could pinpoint, but enough to make her feel something was wrong. The first week, she started double-checking the locks. I watched from the kitchen as she tested her office door 3 times before leaving for work. She installed a new security camera in the hallway, thinking I didn't notice. I made sure to walk past it at exact intervals, creating a pattern she'd obsess over. At the office, I maintained my cold distance but added calculated moves. I scheduled meetings with our CFO during her lunch breaks, knowing she'd wonder what we discussed. I had our IT department run routine security updates on all computers, watching her panic as she worried about her hidden files being discovered. She started backing up her laptop to multiple drives, which she hid in different locations. I knew where each one was. 2 weeks into my campaign, I discovered something interesting. Joey, her personal trainer, wasn't just her lover. He was deeper in this scheme than I'd realized. I found receipts showing he'd been receiving payments through one of her shell companies, listed as fitness consulting services, for amounts that would make professional athletes jealous. He was getting a cut of the stolen money. I started showing up at the gym during their sessions, not to confront, just to be there. I'd work out across the room, never looking their way, but my presence made them nervous. Their whispered conversations became shorter. Joey started fumbling with weights he usually handled easily. Catherine cut their sessions from an hour to 30 minutes. The paranoia was working better than I'd hoped. Catherine began making mistakes. She accidentally used her personal credit card for a shell company expense. She forgot to delete a browser history showing she'd been researching how to tell if someone is onto you, and signs your spouse knows about affair. She even left her secret laptop slightly visible under some boxes in the attic, not fully hidden like before. I photographed everything but touched nothing. Every mistake she made, I documented. Every suspicious transaction, I tracked. I opened my own secure cloud storage, building my own evidence file, but I wasn't planning to use it for court. I had something else in mind. 3 weeks in, I made my first real move. I called the bank about our business credit cards, the ones she'd been declining, and reported them stolen. When the new cards arrived, I activated them, but didn't tell her. She tried to use her card at a business dinner with potential investors, and it was declined. The embarrassment on her face when she had to ask the CFO to cover the bill was priceless. She couldn't complain to me without revealing she'd been using company cards for unauthorized expenses. Her behavior became erratic. She started sleeping poorly, checking her phone constantly. She installed more cameras around the house. She changed her passwords daily. She even hired a private security company to sweep our home for bugs, convinced I was recording her. I wasn't. I didn't need to. Her paranoia was doing all the work. I began leaving subtle hints around the house. A book about financial fraud left on the coffee table. A documentary about white-collar crime playing on the TV when she came home. A newspaper article about embezzlement penalties circled in red pen. Never anything direct, just enough to keep her wondering. The CFO started noticing her strange behavior. He mentioned during a board meeting that Catherine seemed distracted and unusually concerned about routine audits. Other board members nodded in agreement. She tried to deflect, but her hands shook as she shuffled papers. I remained silent, letting her sweat. 1 month into my plan, I discovered she'd moved up her timeline. The plane tickets to Costa Rica were changed from 2 months out to 3 weeks. She was getting scared, ready to run, but she couldn't leave yet, not without completing the final transfers that would frame me completely. She needed me to sign certain documents, real signatures this time, to make her plan airtight. She tried to seduce me, something she hadn't done in months. She cooked my favorite dinner, wore the dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, even suggested we work things out. I ate the dinner in silence and returned to the guest room. Her face crumbled. She knew I knew something, but not what or how much. Joey started cracking under pressure. I had a friend who worked at his gym mention casually that the IRS had been asking questions about personal trainers taking cash payments. Complete lie, but Joey didn't know that. He started pressuring Catherine to move faster, to get the money and run. Their paradise was turning into panic. I found evidence of them arguing through their text messages on her laptop during one of her shower breaks. Joey wanted his cut immediately. Catherine told him to wait, that moving too fast would ruin everything. He threatened to walk away. She begged him to stay. Their perfect plan was unraveling, and I hadn't even confronted them yet. 2 days later, Catherine made a critical error. In her rush to prepare documents for my signature, she accidentally included one that would transfer money from her secret account back to our joint business. She'd mixed up her papers in her paranoid state. I signed it along with the others, keeping my expression neutral. She didn't realize her mistake until that night when she reviewed the documents. I heard her muffled scream from her office. The next morning, $2 million appeared in our company account. She couldn't reverse it without revealing her secret accounts. She couldn't claim it was an error without explaining where the money came from. She was trapped by her own scheme. The $2 million transfer sent shockwaves through our household. Catherine spent the entire next day locked in her office, frantically making phone calls. I could hear her pacing, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor in an anxious rhythm. She emerged only for water, her face pale and drawn, makeup smudged from what looked like tears of frustration. I maintained my routine, leaving for the office at my usual time, but instead of going straight there, I stopped by our bank. The branch manager, Alexander, had known us for 15 years. He greeted me warmly, though his expression shifted when I asked to review our business account activity. "Just want to make sure everything's in order," I said casually. "We've had some unusual transactions lately." Alexander pulled up our records, and I watched his eyebrows rise. The $2 million transfer was there, clear as day, from an account he didn't recognize. I acted surprised, asking him to trace the source. He made some calls while I waited, drinking terrible bank coffee and watching the clock. "It appears to be from an offshore account," he said carefully, "registered to a company called Sunset Consulting LLC. Do you recognize that name?" I shook my head, playing dumb. "That's concerning. Could you put a hold on any future transfers from unknown sources for security purposes?" He agreed immediately, adding extra verification requirements to our accounts. Any large transfer would now require both Catherine's and my authorization in person. I thanked him and left, knowing Catherine would discover this new obstacle soon enough. At the office, I found the CFO, Marcus, in the break room. He looked tired, stress lines creasing his forehead. When he saw me, he stiffened slightly. "Morning, Marcus," I said, pouring myself coffee. "Everything all right? You seem tense." He fumbled with his cup. "Just a lot on my plate. Catherine's been asking for detailed reports on all our transactions going back 3 years. It's time-consuming." I nodded sympathetically. "She mentioned something about a restructuring project. Phase 3? I must have missed that memo." Marcus went pale. "Oh, it's a preliminary idea. Nothing concrete yet." His nervous energy told me everything. He was in deep, but not comfortable with it. I filed that information away for later use. That afternoon, Catherine called my office 6 times. I let each call go to voicemail. Her messages progressed from controlled to frantic. The last one was barely coherent, something about needing to discuss urgent financial matters. I deleted them all and continued reviewing legitimate contracts. When I arrived home that evening, I found her in the kitchen, attempting to to cook again. The counter was covered with ingredients for beef Wellington, my favorite special occasion meal. She'd opened an expensive bottle of wine and lit candles. The desperation was palpable. "We need to talk," she said immediately, her voice strained. "About the business, about us, about everything." I poured myself water instead of wine and sat at the far end of the table. "I'm listening." She launched into a rehearsed speech about how we'd grown apart, how the stress of running the company was affecting our marriage. She suggested we take a vacation, maybe to Costa Rica. Her hands trembled as she mentioned the location. "I've already booked tickets," she said, sliding a folder across the table. 2 weeks from now. We could use the time to reconnect, figure out our next steps. I opened the folder. 2 first-class tickets, but the return date was conspicuously absent. I closed it without comment and continued eating in silence. Her face crumbled further with each passing minute. "Say something," she finally pleaded. "Anything. You're scaring me with this silence." I finished chewing, wiped my mouth, and stood. The beef is overcooked. That night, I heard her on the phone with Joey. Their conversation was heated, though she tried to muffle it. I caught fragments through the thin walls. "He knows something, and we need to move now, and I can't get the rest without his signature." The next morning, I woke early and drove to Joey's gym. Not to work out, but to have a conversation with the owner, Sebastian. We'd known each other casually for years, and he was always eager to chat about business. "Funny thing," I mentioned casually. "My wife's trainer, Joey, mentioned he's thinking of opening his own gym. Said he's come into some investment money." Sebastian's face darkened. "He what?" "That little. He's under a non-compete clause. He can't open a gym within 50 miles for 2 years after leaving here." "Oh, I must have misunderstood," I said. "Maybe he meant after the clause expires." But the seed was planted. Sebastian would be watching Joey closely now, making his life uncomfortable. Sure enough, when I drove past the gym that afternoon, I saw them in heated discussion through the window, Sebastian gesturing angrily while Joey looked defensive. Catherine's paranoia escalated further. She installed motion sensors in the hallway leading to her office. She started carrying her laptop everywhere, even to the bathroom. She changed the locks on her office again, this time to an electronic keypad system. I responded by being aggressively normal. I resumed eating breakfast at home, reading the paper while she watched me nervously. I commented on the weather, asked about her day, mentioned mundane office gossip. The normalcy seemed to terrify her more than my previous silence. 3 days after the $2 million transfer, she tried a new approach. She came to my office with Marcus, presenting a stack of documents that needed my signature. "Routine stuff," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Just updating some account authorizations." I read every page carefully while they waited. Hidden among legitimate papers were 2 documents that would grant her sole authority over our international accounts. I signed everything except those 2. "These need legal review," I said, setting them aside. "I'll have our attorney look at them next week." Catherine's jaw clenched. "They're time-sensitive. We could lose important opportunities if we delay." "Then we lose opportunities," I replied. "I don't sign anything without proper review anymore. New policy." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, sweat beading on his forehead. He knew those documents were crucial to their plan. Without them, Catherine couldn't move the remaining money without my knowledge. That evening, I found evidence of her desperation. She'd been researching forged signature techniques on her laptop, her browser history showing visits to dark web forums. She'd even ordered special pens and papers online, but she'd made another mistake. The shipping address was our home, not a P.O. box. I intercepted the package the next day, replacing the contents with regular office supplies before leaving it on her desk. Joey, meanwhile, was cracking under pressure from multiple angles. Sebastian had cut his hours at the gym, citing performance issues. The fake IRS story had him paranoid about his taxes, and Catherine was demanding he be patient while simultaneously panicking about timelines. I decided to apply more pressure. I hired a private investigator, not to investigate Catherine. I already knew everything I needed, but to make her think I had. I made sure she saw me meeting with him at a coffee shop near our office. The investigator was actually an actor friend who owed me a favor, but Catherine didn't know that. She spent the next 2 days constantly looking over her shoulder, checking her car for tracking devices, and sweeping her office for bugs. The psychological warfare was taking its toll on both of them. Joey showed up at our house one night, demanding to speak with Catherine. I answered the door, acting surprised to see him. "Joey, it's rather late for a training session," I said pleasantly. "Catherine's in her office. Should I get her?" He stammered something about leaving his gym bag, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. He needed reassurance that their plan was still on track. I fetched Catherine, then made sure to hover nearby, preventing any private conversation. Joey left after 5 minutes, more agitated than when he'd arrived. Catherine's mistakes multiplied. She accidentally sent an email meant for Joey to our company's general inbox. Fortunately for her, I intercepted it before anyone else saw it, but I made sure she knew I'd seen it. The email discussed moving forward with the exit strategy and mentioned specific dollar amounts that matched our missing funds. I printed the email and left it on her pillow that night. No note, no confrontation, just the evidence of her carelessness. I heard her gasp when she found it, followed by the sound of paper being frantically shredded. The next day, she made her biggest mistake yet. In her paranoid state, she'd been keeping multiple sets of books, trying to track which version of events she'd told to whom. She brought the wrong laptop to a board meeting, opening it to reveal spreadsheets detailing the real state of our finances. cameras, including the offshore accounts. Board member Sandra caught a glimpse before Catherine slammed it shut, but the damage was done. Sandra approached me after the meeting, concerned. "Is everything all right with the company finances?" she asked. I noticed some unusual accounts on Catherine's screen. I played it off as a new investment strategy we were exploring, but I could see Sandra wasn't convinced. She'd be watching more carefully now, another set of eyes on Catherine's activities. The pressure was building from all sides. Marcus was growing increasingly nervous about his involvement. He started calling in sick, avoiding the office and Catherine's demands for help. Without her inside accomplice, Catherine's plan was stalling. Joey, meanwhile, had reached his breaking point. The gym had cut him down to part-time hours, and his paranoia about the IRS had him jumping at shadows. He started pressuring Catherine publicly, showing up at her legitimate office, calling during business hours. Their careful discretion was crumbling. I maintained my psychological campaign, adding new elements daily. I subscribed Catherine to email newsletters about fraud prevention. I left business cards for forensic accountants in places she'd find them. I bookmarked articles about embezzlement prosecutions on our shared home computer. One morning, Catherine woke to find all her hidden backup drives moved slightly, still in the same hiding spots, but shifted just enough to let her know I'd found them. She spent the entire day creating new backups, finding new hiding places, her paranoia reaching fever pitch. The 2-week mark before her planned Costa Rica escape arrived. Catherine was a wreck. She'd lost weight, her hands shook constantly, and she jumped at every sound. She'd installed so many security measures in our home that she sometimes triggered them herself, setting off alarms in the middle of the night. Joey had given her an ultimatum. He wanted his money within 48 hours, or he was out. Their dream of a beach life together was fracturing under the pressure of reality. I knew because I'd seen their text exchanges during one of Catherine's shower breaks. She'd become careless, leaving her phone unlocked in her desperation to stay connected to her escape plan. The CFO, Marcus, finally cracked. He came to my office, sweating profusely, and broke down. He confessed everything. How Catherine had approached him, promised him a cut, convinced him it was a victimless crime since it was family money. He begged for forgiveness, offered to testify to everything. I listened calmly, then made him an offer. He would continue playing along with Catherine's plan, but report everything to me. In exchange, I wouldn't pursue charges against him. His relief was palpable as he agreed. With Marcus as my inside man, I learned the final details of Catherine's plan. She intended to substance me at a farewell dinner, steal my passwords while I was unconscious, and complete the transfers herself. She'd already purchased the sedatives hidden in her vitamin bottle. I prepared my countermove. I swapped her sedatives with harmless vitamin C tablets and installed hidden cameras in our dining room. When she executed her plan, I'd have evidence of attempted drugging and fraud. The night arrived. Catherine prepared an elaborate meal, her hands shaking as she cooked. She kept checking her phone, coordinating with Joey about their departure. He was to meet her at the airport with new identities he'd procured. She served the wine, making sure to hand me a specific glass. I pretended to drink deeply, while actually pouring most of it into a nearby plant when she wasn't looking. As the meal progressed, I acted increasingly drowsy, finally passing out at the table. Catherine sprang into action. She rifled through my wallet, found the passwords I'd planted there, fake ones that would trigger security alerts, and ran to her office. I could hear her typing frantically, trying to access accounts that would lock her out after 3 failed attempts. Her scream of frustration echoed through the house when she realized the passwords didn't work. She ran back to find me unconscious at the table, shaking me roughly, demanding the real passwords. I remained limp, playing my part. In her desperation, she made one final, fatal error. She called Joey, putting him on speaker as she tried to figure out what to do. Their entire conversation, discussing the fraud, the affair, the plan to frame me, was captured by my hidden cameras. "The passwords don't work," she cried. "He must have changed them. What do we do?" Joey's response was brutal. "I'm done, Catherine. This was supposed to be simple. You said you had it all figured out. I'm not going down for this." "You can't leave me," she begged. "We're so close. The money is there. I just need access." "There is no we anymore," Joey said coldly. "I'm keeping what you already gave me as compensation for this mess. Don't contact me again." The line went dead. Catherine collapsed in a chair, sobbing. Her perfect plan, 3 years in the making, was crumbling around her. She'd lost her lover, her scheme was failing, and she was running out of time. I waited another hour before waking up, acting groggy and confused. Catherine tried to play it off as me having too much wine, but her red eyes and shaking hands betrayed her. "I don't feel well," I mumbled, stumbling toward the guest room. Must be coming down with something. She didn't sleep that night. I could hear her pacing, making phone calls, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of her plan. She called lawyers, financial advisors, even travel agents, but it was too late. The walls were closing in. The next morning brought the final blow. Marcus, following my instructions, informed Catherine that the board had called an emergency audit. All accounts would be frozen pending review. The look of pure panic on her face was almost pitying. She cornered me in the kitchen, all pretense gone. "You know, don't you?" she whispered. "You've known all along." I poured my coffee calmly. "Know what, Catherine? That you're stressed about the audit? It's routine. Nothing to worry about if everything's in order." Her face went through a series of emotions: rage, fear, desperation, and and finally, defeat. She knew she was trapped. The evidence of her affair was documented. Her financial fraud was about to be exposed. Her lover had abandoned her, and I had played her perfectly. "What do you want?" she asked finally, her voice broken. I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Just the truth, Catherine. That's all I've ever wanted." The audit was scheduled for the following Monday. Catherine had 3 days to decide her next move. She could run, but without the money and with her fake identity compromised, she wouldn't get far. She could stay and face the consequences, hoping to minimize the damage. Or she could try one last desperate gambit. I watched her carefully, documenting everything. The cameras captured her destroying evidence, burning papers in the fireplace at 3 a.m. Marcus reported that she'd tried to access the accounts one final time, only to find them completely locked down. By Sunday night, Catherine had aged years in days. The confident, scheming woman who'd planned my destruction was gone, replaced by a hollow shell. She sat in her office, surrounded by the remnants of her plan, staring at the Costa Rica tickets that would never be used. I prepared for the final phase of my plan. The audit would reveal everything, but I had a choice to make. I could let it play out naturally, watching Catherine face the consequences of her actions. Or I could offer her a deal, one that would save her from complete ruin, but ensure she never forgot the price of betrayal. The power was entirely in my hands now. 3 years of her planning, undone by 2 months of my patience. The woman who'd tried to destroy me was now at my mercy, and I intended to savor every moment of her downfall. As Monday morning approached, I sat in my study, reviewing all the evidence I'd collected. Videos, documents, recordings, photographs, enough to bury Catherine completely. But complete destruction wasn't my goal. I wanted something more satisfying than simple revenge. I wanted her to live with the knowledge that she'd lost everything because of her own greed and betrayal. I wanted her to wake up every morning remembering how close she'd come to her dream life, only to have it slip away because she'd underestimated the man she'd vowed to love and honor. The sun rose on Monday morning, bringing with it the promise of resolution. Catherine hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't left her office. She was waiting for the inevitable, knowing that her carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. I dressed carefully, choosing my best suit. Today would be the culmination of weeks of psychological warfare. Today, Catherine would learn the true cost of betrayal, and I would finally have my justice, served not with anger or violence, but with the cold, calculated precision she'd tried to use against me. The game was almost over, and I had won. Monday morning arrived with an overcast sky that matched the tension in our house. I found Catherine in the kitchen at 5 a.m., surrounded by shredded documents and empty coffee cups. Her laptop was open to our company's banking portal, though she couldn't access anything beyond the login screen. I poured myself orange juice and sat across from her. She looked up with bloodshot eyes, her usually perfect makeup absent. For the first time in our marriage, she looked defeated. "The audit team arrives at 9, I said conversationally. "Sandra called yesterday. She's bringing 2 external accountants." Catherine's hands trembled as she closed her laptop. She stood abruptly, knocking over her coffee cup. The dark liquid spread across her financial papers, making the ink run. She didn't move to clean it. I watched her walk to her office, probably for the last time as my wife and business partner. Through the doorway, I saw her opening drawers, pulling out USB drives and documents. She was still trying to hide evidence, not realizing I'd already documented everything. At 7 a.m., Marcus arrived at our house unexpectedly. Catherine answered the door, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. Marcus looked terrible. He hadn't slept either, judging by his wrinkled clothes and 5 o'clock shadow. "We need to talk," Marcus said, pushing past her into our living room. "I can't do this anymore." Catherine followed him, shooting nervous glances at me. I remained in the kitchen, pretending to read emails on my phone while listening to every word. Marcus's voice cracked as he spoke. "I'm telling them everything. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, all of it. I've already contacted my lawyer." "You can't!" Catherine's voice was desperate. "We had a deal. You're implicated too." "I don't care anymore," Marcus replied. "I have kids, Catherine. I can't look them in the eye knowing what I've done. I'm coming clean." I heard footsteps heading toward the kitchen. Marcus appeared in the doorway, saw me, and froze. His face went pale. "Morning, Marcus," I said calmly. "Coffee?" He shook his head and practically ran from the house. Catherine stood in the hallway, her entire body shaking. She knew Marcus would follow through on his threat. Her inside accomplice had just become her biggest liability. By 8 a.m., Catherine had made her decision. I found her in the bedroom, throwing clothes into a suitcase. The Costa Rica tickets lay on the bed, torn in half. She'd realized that escape route was compromised. "Going somewhere?" I asked from the doorway. She didn't answer, just continued packing with frantic movements. Her phone buzzed constantly, probably Joey trying to reach her, or maybe Marcus's lawyer. She ignored it all. I walked to the closet and pulled out a small box from the top shelf. Inside were the backup drives she'd hidden there last week, the ones she thought I hadn't found. I set them on the bed next to her suitcase. Catherine stopped packing. She stared at the drives, then at me. "How long have you known? Does it matter?" I replied. "The question is what happens next." She sank onto the bed, crushing her carefully folded clothes. "What do you want? Money? The company? A divorce?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a video, the recording of her drugging attempt from 3 nights ago. Her face went white as she watched herself rifling through my wallet, heard her desperate conversation conversation with Joey. I want you to attend the audit, I said simply. Tell them everything. Every account, every transfer, every forged document. Complete honesty. They'll destroy me, she whispered. I'll lose everything. You've already lost everything, I corrected. Joey's gone. Marcus is confessing. The money's frozen. Your plan failed. This is about damage control now. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen and laughed bitterly. It's Joey. He's been calling all morning. Probably wants to make sure I haven't implicated him. Answer it, I suggested. On speaker. She hesitated, then accepted the call. Joey's voice filled the room, panicked and angry. Catherine, what the hell is going on? Sebastian fired me. He says the IRS is investigating me. You said this was foolproof. It's over, Joey, Catherine said flatly. Everything's falling apart. You promised me $2 million, he shouted. I gave up everything for this. My job, my reputation. Your reputation? Catherine laughed harshly. You mean as the trainer who sleeps with married clients for money? The line went silent for a moment. Then Joey's voice turned cold. If I go down, you're going down with me. I have texts, emails, everything. You think you're so smart, but I kept records too. Do whatever you want, Catherine said. I'm done. She hung up and tossed the phone aside. We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, I heard cars arriving, probably the audit team. Catherine must have heard them too because she stood and walked to the window. 3 cars, she reported. Sandra brought an army. They're thorough, I agreed. Sandra's good at her job. Catherine turned to face me. You orchestrated all of this, didn't you? Every detail. Making me paranoid, turning Joey against me, getting Marcus to confess. You played me like a chess game. I shrugged. You played yourself. I just made sure you knew I was watching. The doorbell rang. Catherine smoothed her wrinkled clothes and ran fingers through her unwashed hair. I suppose there's no point in pretending anymore. We walked to the door together. Sandra stood on the porch with 2 stern-looking accountants carrying briefcases and laptops. Behind them, I noticed Alexander from the bank. Good morning, Sandra said professionally, though her eyes showed concern. We're here for the audit. I've asked Alexander to join us given the unusual transfers he reported. Catherine stepped aside to let them in. The office is this way. I'll get you whatever you need. As they filed past, Alexander caught my eye. He'd been instrumental in freezing the accounts, though Catherine didn't know that yet. I nodded my thanks. The audit team set up in our dining room, spreading laptops and documents across the table. Catherine sat at one end, looking small and defeated. I took a seat at the other end, close enough to observe but far enough to give her space. Sandra began with basic questions about our company structure, but quickly moved to the suspicious transfers. Can you explain the purpose of Sunset Consulting LLC? Catherine's hands clenched in her lap. She looked at me, then at the team. It's a shell company. I created it to move money offshore. The accountants exchanged glances and started typing furiously. Sandra leaned forward. How much money are we talking about? $8 million over 3 years, Catherine admitted. Hidden through 7 shell companies and 4 offshore accounts. Alexander pulled out bank records. We've frozen all associated accounts as of Friday. The $2 million that was transferred back is secured, but the rest. It's in the Cayman Islands, Catherine continued. Account numbers are in my office safe. I'll give you the combination. For the next 3 hours, Catherine laid out her entire scheme. She explained how she'd recruited Marcus, forged my signatures, created false documentation. She showed them the deepfake software she'd used, the photos she'd taken of me signing legitimate documents. The audit team documented everything meticulously. Occasionally, they asked for clarification or additional documents. Catherine provided it all, her voice growing hoarse from talking. Around noon, Marcus arrived with his lawyer. He looked relieved to see Catherine already confessing. He joined the session, corroborating her story and adding details about his involvement. She approached me 18 months ago, Marcus explained. Said it was a way to protect assets from potential lawsuits. I knew it was wrong, but she was persuasive. Promised me 10%. Joey's name came up repeatedly. Catherine explained his role, how she'd funneled money to him through fake consulting fees. Sandra made notes about contacting him, though I suspected Joey was already packing to leave town. By 2 p.m., the full scope of the fraud was documented. Sandra closed her laptop and looked at Catherine with a mixture of disappointment and disgust. This is extensive criminal fraud, Sandra stated. The board will meet tomorrow to decide on immediate actions. I recommend you retain a lawyer. Catherine nodded numbly. The audit team packed up their equipment and files. As they prepared to leave, Sandra pulled me aside. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I know this must be devastating. The company will survive, but Catherine, she's finished. After they left, Catherine and I sat alone in the dining room. The house felt eerily quiet after hours of confession and documentation. She looked at me with hollow eyes. What now? She asked. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared days ago. Divorce papers, already filed. You'll sign them, transfer your shares of the company to me, and leave. Today. She took the papers with shaking hands. Where will I go? That's not my concern anymore, I replied. But I suggest somewhere far from here. The board will likely pursue criminal charges. Catherine signed the papers without reading them. Her signature was shaky, but legal. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, she said, I'm sorry. Not for trying, but for failing, for hurting you. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She packed a single suitcase and left in her car an hour later. I watched from the window as she drove away, her entire life reduced to what she could carry. The house felt different without her presence, lighter somehow, despite the circumstances. That evening, I called a locksmith to change all the locks. I also hired a cleaning service to to pack up Catherine's office. Among her things, they found more evidence: backup drives, forged documents, even a journal detailing her plans. I gave it all to Sandra for the investigation. Marcus resigned from the company that night via email. He agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. Joey disappeared entirely, his apartment empty, his phone disconnected. Sebastian later told me Joey had cleared out his locker at the gym and vanished without collecting his final paycheck. The next morning, the board convened an emergency meeting. I presented the full evidence of Catherine's fraud, including the video of her drugging attempt. The board voted unanimously to pursue criminal charges and to ban her from any future involvement with the company. Within a week, forensic accountants had traced most of the stolen money. The offshore accounts were frozen pending legal action. Recovery would take months, maybe years, but it was possible. I returned to running the company, now as sole owner. Employees were shocked by the scandal, but rallied around me. We hired a new CFO, implemented strict financial controls, and slowly rebuilt trust with our clients and investors. 3 weeks after Catherine left, I received a letter from her lawyer. She was in Mexico, apparently, trying to negotiate a plea deal to avoid extradition. She wanted to know if I'd testify on her behalf, perhaps recommend leniency. I threw the letter in the trash without responding. The house felt strange at first, too quiet, too empty, but gradually, I settled into a new routine. Morning coffee alone, evening walks without checking over my shoulder, peaceful nights without wondering what schemes were being plotted in the next room. 6 months later, Catherine was arrested at the Mexican border trying to re-enter the US. She'd run out of money. Joey had long since abandoned her, and desperation had driven her back. She pleaded guilty to fraud, embezzlement, and attempted assault for the drugging incident. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in federal prison, plus restitution of all stolen funds. I attended the sentencing but didn't speak. Catherine looked at me once from the defendant's table, her orange jumpsuit a far cry from her designer clothes. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just emptiness. Marcus received 2 years probation and community service for his cooperation. He lost his accounting license and now works at his brother's restaurant. Joey was never found, though rumors suggested he'd fled to South America with whatever money Catherine had already given him. The company recovered stronger than before. The audit had revealed not just Catherine's fraud, but also weaknesses in our systems. We fixed them all, becoming a model for financial transparency. Sandra joined our board permanently, her vigilance ensuring nothing like this could happen again. I never remarried. Trust, once shattered so completely, doesn't rebuild easily, but I found peace in solitude, in work, in the simple pleasure of knowing my life was my own again. The beach house in Costa Rica that Catherine had bought was seized and sold at auction. The proceeds went toward restitution. I heard the new owners were a retired couple from Canada who knew nothing of its history. They probably enjoyed sunset walks on the beach, oblivious to the dreams that had died there. Man, sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I'd confronted Catherine immediately, if I'd tried to save our marriage instead of orchestrating her downfall. But then I remembered the photos with Joey, the forged documents with my signature, the years of calculated deception. She'd made her choice long before I made mine. The last I heard, Catherine was teaching accounting to other inmates, using her skills for something positive finally. Maybe prison gave her the clarity that wealth and deception never could. Or maybe she was planning her next scheme. I no longer cared enough to wonder. My company thrived. My life stabilized. The ghost of betrayal faded with time. And in the end, that was the greatest revenge of all. Not her destruction, but my indifference to it. She'd wanted to destroy me, to take everything I'd built. Instead, she'd freed me from a marriage built on lies and given me the chance to build something better. The sun sets now on a life reclaimed, a business restored, and a future unburdened by the past. Catherine got her punishment. I got my freedom. And somewhere in Mexico or South America or wherever he'd run, Joey got to keep whatever blood money he'd earned. Justice isn't always perfect, but sometimes it's enough.